Hey everybody, welcome back to our weekly podcast. My name is Patrick Tan, General Counsel for ChatArgos, the blockchain intelligence firm made famous for unraveling Binance's $1.4 billion under-collateralized BUSD stablecoin. With me, as usual, is John, and you can see, obviously, John's not here in the studio with me. He's YOLOing himself on a vacation. John's our CEO and Chief Data Scientist. Thank you for dialing in from wherever it is that you may be. It looks better than wherever it is that I am. Hope you're having fun. Anyway, what are we talking about this week, John? We've got three major topics for you, and if you stay right through to the very end, you'll get some bonus content this week. So we're going to talk a little bit about the analytics firm, because we've seen a lot of letters coming out from the U.S. Congress, letters to the U.S. Congress, about how they're conflicting reports. One of those letters, it's just on my desk. I think it came out like yesterday or the day before. Well, actually, it's the day before. This is a letter from Congress, a bipartisan letter to both Janet Yellen, who is the secretary for the U.S. Department of Treasury, as well as Joe Biden, who's the president, asking them to look into Hamas-linked digital wallets, and particularly because there have been conflicting reports about the amounts that are being laundered through these wallets. So we're going to talk about that. Next, we're going to talk about a tweet that we did not too long ago as to seeing how Kraken is suddenly becoming a magnet for USDT, USDC. It's just being sucked in like a black hole, and all the USDT and USDC in the world is heading into Kraken. That's what it looks like. I exaggerate. Finally, we'll talk about some fresh rules out of the NYDFS. If you're looking to get one of those sweet bit licenses, they've changed the rules on you, what the rules mean, what the implications of the rules, and is this a whole new regime? John's got all the dish for that coming up. And then the bonus content. So let's just jump straight into it. Let's talk a little bit about these analytics firms. And one of the concerns that our Congress people have respected that. So let me just read to you this particular quote that comes from the letter. And it says specifically, okay, it appears that the digital asset analytics companies themselves cannot agree as to what the quantum is, and it could far exceed the amount Hamas has received through digital asset donations. So the companies, in a nutshell, because it's pretty long, the companies themselves, the analytics companies themselves, at least according to this letter from Congress to the Biden administration, is that what is the number? Nobody knows. Is it 93 million that was raised for Hamas? Is it 41 million? Is it 104 million? Is it 10 billion? Probably not.
Oh, well, sorry, raised is not. I mean, I think there's so there was a
correct.
podcast
And that's the problem here.
There's a conflation of raised and sort of used system for it, right? So I think everyone will acknowledge that there's no evidence that a meaningful amount of money was raised via donations in this way, and that the Wall Street Journal's headline to that effect was misleading. But that doesn't mean that the system isn't a good way of laundering, transferring, distributing whatever other sorts of payments. That conflation, intentional or otherwise, has confused a lot of people. I mean, it's also interesting, and I find it amusing that people that have access to like CIA briefings are saying these private businesses can't agree on the amount when I agree that it's impossible to know the exact amount, but it's a lot easier for people that have access to the CIA and the NSA and whatnot to answer those questions than it is for people who do not. So
let me read the sentence exactly. This is particularly critical given the conflicting reports we have on Hamas's fundraising campaign from blockchain analytics firms. I mean, to your point, you have access to the NSA.
Yeah, I mean, so we had a couple of weeks ago, this was kind of the beginning of this whole thing, found some listings of wallets, there's some sanctioning procedures, primarily from the Israeli government intelligence services. And all they did was publish a list of wallets and said they're associated with whatever group. They didn't say how they were associated. You have to imagine there's files somewhere that explain the nature of the association that are never going to be put up on a PDF on a website, nor would it make sense for them to do that, whatever. Okay, we don't have that information, but that information exists. I mean, I don't think that they simply have a big chalkboard where they write up addresses when they find one on a thumb drive, right? There's information. That's what intelligence services do. They have information.
This is a problem that we've talked about week after week after week, and it seems nobody seems to be listening, which is that everybody's talking about a different number: stock versus flow. it's very difficult to figure out
Well,
how.
I mean, okay, stock versus flow is one of the dimensions of problems. The other one is people saying the amount of donations was tiny. Okay, in the same way that there's that old Chainalysis report saying only 1% of crypto transactions are associated with crime, but what they meant was crypto native crime, not crime, right? And they explicitly say that. In the same way that donations and money that was just collected in some state-owned bank somewhere and distributed via, these are problems of the same nature from a societal perspective. They're just not identical from a technology perspective.
Okay,
Right.
and to your point about Chainalysis, I think it's interesting that you brought that up. There was a recent
Also, I should just say before you continue that report about the 1%, they are 100% clear what they're talking about, and there's nothing
yes.
wrong with.
No. I'm not saying that. Yeah, we're not saying that at all. I think what's probably even more interesting though, and that 1% thing is, from what we've seen, every time somebody claims that a problem is only 1%, it's just never ended up well. Let's circumreference Purdue Pharma. Okay, so enough said. But anyway, last week, Laura Shin had a Unchained podcast, and she spoke to, I think it's the head of strategy for Chainalysis.
The sanctions strategy or something like that.
Sanction strategy, something along those lines. I can't recall exactly what his title was, and he actually made reference to a blog that she had brought up. Laura had brought up. So Laura had brought up a blog where Chainalysis was sort of like suggesting that the numbers in the Wall Street Journal and the the elliptic post were grossly overstated. The numbers are much, much smaller. And so Laura asked her, how did you derive those numbers? And what was his response?
Yeah, the answer was essentially a total disavowal of those numbers. So they said that the 450,000 that was contained in that publication was an example for one wallet of something that they had, tracked from whatever first principles from the ground level. And that was not an estimate of the total amount in any way, which is not the verbiage on the blog post, but whatever. We'll take subsequent on-camera quotes that have not been corrected on the record to be what's the old Nixon phrase? The old information is no longer operative. Right? We'll take this to be the official position of the company, which is also fair enough. I mean, acknowledging that you've only done some investigation of a small number of wallets that you are sure are associated with this activity. There's a huge gap above it. You're not saying 100% of that, 5% of that, whatever. You don't know. We don't know. To our earlier comment, there are people in the world that work for government agencies that are in a better position to answer those questions. Yeah, fair enough. I'm not asserting we know that it's 75% or 22% or whatever it is. Yeah, so they said that number was not intended to be an overall sort of approximation of the total level. That implies that the fraction of the total number of dollars that represents is not their estimate of the fraction of the flow that is a problem here, the stock or the flow, whatever. So, okay, fair enough. There was also I believe this Wall Street Journal reporting came out in between the recording and the publication of that podcast.
You're correct.
So there was an article in the Wall Street Journal that relied heavily on sources from what I believe they described as Western and allied intelligence agencies. Okay, I mean, whoever that is. Nobody was quoted by name, but you have to assume the Wall Street Journal editors checked that one. I'm trusting that. That could be wrong. I'm open to that being wrong.
They obviously got it from Waffle House. Everybody knows that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, maybe that's where some of the meetings happen. Anyway, they essentially said that many of the intermediary service provider type businesses were owned by the state actors that are providing the financing here. Well, if you're a sanctioned state actor owned money changer business conducting terrorist financing, it's a pretty safe bet that more than the sort of average amount of business in the world that's dark goes through your business. In fact, it could be 100%. In some sense, if it's owned by the sanctioned party, by definition, it's 100%. But there's no reason to believe if the total amount of dodgy business in the world is 1%, that or 5% or whatever, that ratio applies to businesses owned by sanctioned state actors trying to finance whatever stuff that society or some societies, some governments don't like. Yeah, so that was interesting. I've not seen anyone respond substantively to that reporting on the record at all. It is in some sense consistent with the 450K number was an example, not an estimate, in that, it's probably much higher than that fraction. Fine, because, again, the intermediaries are owned by. So, okay, I read that Wall Street Journal article to be the intelligence sources that were behind some of the original reporting or confirming the original reporting,
Yeah.
trying to help the newspaper out by saying, we did not realize this would be so misconstrued.
Yes.
These people, service providers, are not always dealing with dodgy people, and they're coming back and saying, like, we can't give you the name, the address, and the whatever secret video recordings or whatever spies do. But like, yeah, we're willing to confirm, such as it is, that a large fraction of that business is of that sort. We're going to find out.
Yeah.
Certainly, if people in Congress ask the administration to look more deeply into this, I mean, the president could definitely get an NSA brief.
Oh, I should hope so.
It should be possible to answer these questions better. We're eventually going to get detailed hearings and intelligence released. This could be 10 years from now. We're eventually going to get answers to this question.
Yeah, no, but I guess what concerns me is that, okay, so we are a blockchain intelligence firm. We provide the data, we provide the analytics. You draw your own conclusions from the data. Sometimes those conclusions and those inferences are pretty obvious, and we'll help you to make them. But where it's not clear and we don't know, we'll be honest about it. We'll say it's not clear and we don't know. I think at least it's interesting that some firms would represent that they know. When it's clear that, like what was the Rumsfeld line, the unknowable unknowns, and this is one of them.
Yeah, the unknown unknowns. No, this is a known unknown. This is
it's a known unknown. Sorry, yeah.
There is an exact fraction of business going through every given money changer in the world that's affiliated with the Iranian government, the French government, the Swedish government, whatever. We just don't know the number, but there is a number.
So it's I wouldn't know if this is a knowable unknown or is an unknowable unknown. I mean, we know it's an unknown, but I think it's an unknowable. At least from our perspective, it's an unknowable unknown. Maybe from the NSA's perspective. Yeah, from the NSA's perspective, maybe it's a quantifiable unknown, and they know how to unknow this. They know how to know the unknown. So, but I think it's interesting that, and I don't think that's our job as intelligence companies to either say that, to come out with statements to say that, look, hey, it's not a problem, don't worry about it, forget about it,
I mean, if you're providing analysis, you're providing analysis. I don't know that it's not your job. I think that actually it is your job to provide some context. I think the attitude that it's only a sort of black market, whatever, black business transfer, if you have absolute proof that particular flow is out of bounds, and there's no reason to believe
I agree.
That is. I just think that's bad. That's a bad analytical framework. I don't think that it's not your job to analyze those questions. I think it's just an unreasonable way of approaching
I guess, okay, no, let me rephrase. That's not what I meant. What I meant was that I don't think it's your job to be apologizing for either side. Like, I don't think it's.
Oh, okay, yeah. It's no one's fault that we don't know the answer to this thing, and we should be honest about how we're going about estimating. Yeah,
I don't think it's
the last podcast. I think everybody was pretty honest about how much they do and don't know about what's going on.
Yeah, I got no problem with I got no problem with the Laura Shin podcast. I think that was good. In fact, that should have been written in the blog post as opposed to the other way around.
I don't think that they'd have been necessary to have these kinds of clarification discussions if the original discussion was quite so open about what was sort of how big the error bars were. Yes. It's also becoming clearer and clearer that, we're going to be able to get better estimates over time. And that no one, it could be, what is the Overton window? So the range of acceptable estimates has shifted. I don't think anyone believes that 1%, 0.1% anymore. So eventually you'd hope the Overton window converges to the actual value. We'll find out after the congressional hearings in 2037 or whatever it is. But.
So speaking of which, and I don't know if you noticed this, but I think it was, and maybe not everybody's noticed this, but Elliptic actually went backwards in time to adjust and make some amendments quietly to the original report that the Wall Street Journal leaned on for its article.
There's been changes all over the place here in ways that don't cover anybody.
They change figures in some cases. They definitely changed the language. They changed the title, and to sort of like make it more, to make crypto look more cuddly, I guess, is the
Well, I mean, changing stuff if you've made a mistake or you've changed your opinion.
Oh yeah, that's fine.
But you should acknowledge the. I mean, okay. a lot of people are not used to the type of scrutiny that comes from, terrorist financing related discussions in wholesale amounts of money. And I think many of these people were not prepared for that. And the idea that the Wall Street Journal would be able to get clearly more than one intelligence agency to provide them with as close to on the record information as they can to refute claims made by, that's a pretty serious level of engagement that I don't think people discussing blockchain usage for the future of finance are used to, right?
Yeah.
And you also know with absolute certainty that those people know more than you do about what's going on. Or certainly if they care, within a few weeks they will.
Yes.
So anyway.
I think I thought it was unfortunate, I guess. It's probably the adjective I'm looking for.
I mean, live and learn. As long as everybody does better next time, it should be all right.
Yeah, I mean, I just thought
it's going to be a next time, right?
No, there is going to be next time, but I just thought it's unfortunate that you would go back in time. Well, not go back in time, but you're trying to go back in time. But unfortunately, the internet never forgets. Nor does it let you forget. But I thought it's unfortunate that you would go back in time and not stand by what honestly was an honest piece of good data, and you were doing your job. You were reporting.
I would hope
that's disappointing. It's disappointing.
No, I would hope that the parties involved go back and have sort of an honest assessment of what. I mean, when a major newspaper has an issue with the guy making up reporting or whatever it is, eventually there's usually some big investigation of what happened there.
Yeah,
it would be nice if such a thing were arranged. I mean, we'll find out.
We'll find out. And I just think as an analytics company, it's strange that you would do that. Like, all right. I mean, it's an interesting choice. Let's put it.
No, fair enough. I mean, if it happens again, it's going to be a real issue. If it's dealt with in the adult way, we'll see what happens. All right. I mean,
all right. So enough about that. And just for the record, because we tell the truth with such a high degree of regularity, I just want to make it clear that John's not in hiding right now. So he's not on the run. He will be back in the studio.
No, I mean, I think this is a lot from the background of the people involved in this, right? So our stuff tends to be written from much more of a scientific, like, I do and don't know the answer to this thing. And there tends to be very little spin. I know you historically had complained that my stuff was not understandable, or the inferences were not clearly drawn out, because the inferences are, there for somebody else to make, right? It's not necessarily your place. The numbers.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I agree.
That's enough on that one. I suppose.
But just for the record, he's not on the run, and we're not all on the run, and I am not in a bunker, and he's not on the run, as far as we know. So, next topic, we want to talk about Kraken, which has been the sort of like the tractor beam for USDT, USDC flows in a way we've not seen for a very long time. What's going
on? So I think even the last time Kraken was okay. So I guess we can do a bit of history and then come back.
Let's do a bit of history. Let's do a bit of history.
The first sort of major U.S. whatever exchange with meaningful volume that was doing USDT versus USD was Kraken. This is years ago when that originally was.
They were the OG.
Long years. So at that time, I don't think USDC was even very much. So it isn't even like
tiny
one thing. It was USD for USDT, and then there was a amusing and somewhat unhinged blog post about whatever involving that stuff from early 2021. I guess you can put the link to the old Medium to that guy's one-off account for that posting, discussing how that person had concluded that the whole USDT thing made no sense, and that the Kraken redemption off ramp into dollars was probably the most expensive part of the system for them to run to keep the price up. Whatever. Fine. So Kraken was the only USDT major developed country, large market, whatever type exchange. At that time, there were smaller offshore things to the bit, but banking was very difficult. We're talking like 2018, 2017, 2018, 2019, maybe even 17. I don't recall exactly. Anyway, and then a lot of that pivoted away. Most famously, Alameda Research, FTX, became the largest intermediary at one point for a lot of USDT, USD stuff, and it's now all come back. So following that implosion, Binance was the main place for a lot of this stuff. Yeah. And then Binance, a variety of things happened. They had banking problems, and they cycled through TUSD and FDUSD, and all kinds of stuff has happened. And what we've now settled on, and we tweeted some charts that make this pretty clear, is that we're back to Kraken being the main USDT vehicle. At the same time, the biggest sort of action in that space now is this USDC to USDT burn and mint cycle, and we can see a lot of that happening via Kraken. that isn't terribly surprising given it's now the main USDT USD vehicle, and USDC is used in, lots of exchanges are happy with that one. Fine. So that's interesting. What we were seeing with Alameda was primarily dollars going into USDT. What we're seeing via Kraken, because of the nature of the market changing, is the USDT being produced and USDC being burned. Whether that's happening directly out of Kraken or one step removed, separate discussion, doesn't really matter. There's not necessarily anything wrong with this. No one's asserting Kraken's doing anything wrong.
No. It's just interesting.
Historically being the largest USDT source, in the last couple of years has attracted scrutiny and usually not been a fantastic, like empirically it went poorly. That's not an opinion. That's just a statement of fact.
That's just fact. That's a statement of fact.
Right. They have a lot of banking relationships and they're associated with banks in, onshore, such as it is. They're also on their website or something. So presumably everybody's fine with this and it'll be okay. It'll be interesting to see what happens if this process effectively redeems USDC down to as close to zero as, what's the German? As close to zero as makes no difference, to a level where the holders are holding it for some mandate reason and they won't even sell it for $1.05 or $1.10.
Yeah.
Okay. It's just USDT. And I guess that'll be the way on and off. And that's that. And those banks will be processing those payments. That's fine. It is an oddly centralized variant of the system. And yeah, again, historically, that's not gone well.
It's not ended well.
Managing all of that. I mean, that goes all the way back to the crypto capital days where like the main fiat vehicle has had trouble. Maybe those problems are resolved and actually this is all fine now and things can move forward in an exclusively legal and constructive way or not. No,
it is possible. It is possible. Yeah. It's just that
I don't know what would be next.
Correct. I laugh because historically that's not what's happened, but it is possible.
It would be the first time, but if the system is going to regularize itself, there will be a first time. So okay, you're going to find out, but because
there will be a first time one way or the other.
Like 18 months is the longest that anybody's really been the vehicle for that. So, if that pattern holds sometime in the next year-ish, you'd expect to have the answer to that. I mean, when Binance was intermediating this for the early part of the year, that went for what? Probably not even 6 months till they basically ditched that token and started with TUSD. The crypto capital stuff went on for, 18 months, 2 years. Prior, Kraken was doing stuff for whatever, a couple of years after. So we'll see. I mean, they've never delisted it. They just wanted, this large of an intermediary, this large of a player.
Yeah, correct. That has not changed. So
it's funny to watch the stuff cycling. Although they've survived for a really long time. So, we'll see.
We'll see. There was a recent raid on Jesse Powell's house. And some people are drawing a link to that, but honestly, the correlation is not causation. And
no, that correlation is not causation. According to the pleadings, those things have nothing to do with each other.
Correct. Exactly.
May or may not really be the case. Who knows? But there's no evidence that those are related. So
yeah, and I mean, we're not really in the business of speculating. All right, let's talk about the new NYDFS's new guidelines for the bit license.
Yes, the token listing and whatnot in general. Yeah.
So it was issued 2 days ago. I have it in front of me. It says here, to all virtual currency business entities licensed under 23 NYCRR Part 200 or chartered as a limited purpose trust companies under the New York banking law. It's guidance regarding listing of virtual currencies. Take it away, John.
So the short version here is that that they've published a short list of tokens called the green list that people with these licenses can trade without restriction. That list is very short. It does not even include every stable coin that they.
It doesn't include USDC. Very glaringly.
Most fine. That's a short list. It does have Bitcoin and Ethereum and PayPal, dollar, whatever. There's like 6 or 7 things, most of which are quite small. And then they say that if you're going to keep this license, you need to either get your listings approved by them, and they'll tell you maybe to delist or get your delistings approved by them. I doubt they're going to reject a delisting. Or you have to get your listing and delisting procedures approved by them. The rules are effective immediately, and the deadline for getting your procedures approved is, I believe it was early 2024, either February or March.
There's not a lot of time.
So that gives all people with these licenses a couple of choices. The first one is to say, we're basically retreating from New York. We don't need this license. We're going to do all our trading for the non-green listed tokens somewhere else, offshore, state, different, whatever. That's a totally rational thing. I guess one of your choices is to just defy the regulator and trade there. Anyway, I mean, that's a choice. I don't think that's likely to fly. And the third one is to say, all right, well, we're going to submit to this regime and we're going to engage with you and submit, these procedures and see what happens. That might be fine. It does seem like they are significantly backtracking on their prior approach of like, enjoy yourselves and just give us some notifications. So you would expect they're not going to approve procedures that basically say everything we've always done was fantastic, because this change in rules makes it feel like they don't believe everything that was always done is fantastic. That's not our opinion. That's like, why would they promulgate this if they didn't want to get a handle on these things?
They don't think everything is awesome.
That's right. So you'd expect that they at least want some delistings to occur. Exactly what that is, I don't know. I guess the most glaring thing is that people with those licenses trade USDT, and that's never been anywhere near licensed. In fact, it's been banned in New York or whatever, New York restrictions for a while. So you'd think they'd want some delistings. Now, one outcome here is the companies submit the rules, they negotiate a bit back and forth, and then the government affects the delistings they wanted, and everybody moves on. At that point, those exchanges are under the thumb of that regulator, and tokens are at their whim, which is the way stock markets, whatever, stuff works that way. That's okay. That's the way markets can operate. The alternative is either, I don't think people are going to go that low, is to just withdraw, right? Now, the problem there is I don't know what your banking access is going to look like if you say we're not even going to try and get this license, we're going to retreat, because you can complain that regulators in some parts of the world aren't terribly with it or won't discuss it with you or whatever it is. The problem is the New York banking regulators have so much discretion and ability to cut off various people's access to banking. They've affected major change at massive international banks by Standard Chartered, my favorite example from that. Why do we have to listen to there's the CFO, I think, saying, why do we have to listen to Americans? We're not an American bank. And the answer was because you want a New York banking license, and then they, fine you massively. They have a lot of power to affect that quickly, because if they put out something saying this bank is now off limits, you're finished. Right? And that threat has been used many times. I'm also not saying I think the government should or should not have or exercise this power. I'm saying empirically they do and have. So living in the world as it is, that's the thing. So I can't see retreating and still doing all the old business as a viable strategy if they want to keep all their banking. Certainly not if they want to keep their major U.S. domestic banking.
And you see this,
off the New York DFS is a bad idea. So
you see this all the time where the new laws come out, SEC promulgate something. In this case, it's NYDFS, and the crypto bros go like, "Oh, screw it! America's not friendly to crypto. We're all gonna go offshore." Okay, what about your banking then?
Well, they can certainly end up in a situation where they submit these procedures, agree them onshore, and then run an onshore exchange and have a separate offshore exchange that has limited access to banking, whatever. And that's the way a lot of businesses in the world work. All the banks that everybody's heard of that are, the 10, 15, 20 largest banks in the world all have offshore operations that normal people can't just walk into with a driver's license and a stack of cash and get a bank account. And that's fine. If they're going to separate them, they're then going to have to ensure that they're actually separated, because and this is a theme that's come through a lot of stuff I've tweeted and discussed with people and come up on the podcast before, while we are familiar with how onshore versus offshore finance operate, a lot of people in this space do not seem to appreciate how different those two worlds are. And if you try to run those businesses the same way at the same time and have them interact at whatever level you want, that is going to end poorly, because the regulators are very familiar with how those things operate, and they know how to wall off the stuff that's their responsibility from the stuff that's effectively no one's responsibility.
All right. So finally, bonus content, because we're running out of time. Let's talk a bit about the campaign for accountability. We found this interesting simply because they used the tweet that we had, took a screenshot, and the campaign for accountability, which, if you're not familiar, is a liberal lobby group. And they took a tweet that we tweeted about, I can't remember what it was. It was Tron, Justin Sun, something along that. Basically Tron stable. Oh, Hamas flows. Yeah. So they took a screenshot of one of our tweets, submitted that as Exhibit A, send the letter into Congress. Sorry, not Congress. Not just Congress, but the Senate Banking Committee. Specifically the Senate Banking Committee, to ask them to act against Tron, Justin Sun, with respect to some of these Hamas flows. And then specifically talking a bit about USDC as well, and how that's going to impact the Circle's IPO.
Yeah, there was a quote, something like, whether U.S. regulated financial products being issued on platforms that are outside the regulatory remit, and whether that's reasonable. Look, I mean, that's a fair question, I suppose. Yeah, it's interesting that this is now becoming a political issue in a direction that is not really finance related. I mean, they're communicating with the banking committee because those people have oversight over the banks that are involved in processing these dollar flows, not because the underlying questions are actually related to the banking committee. Yeah, a lot of the stuff related to this financing of bad actors and foreign influence stuff in general are pretty good vote getters in a lot of the world, right?
Yeah.
So if it's a political question, you may not like the fact that these things are being cited politically. Sorry, the sun seems to have moved.
It's not the sun that moves, actually, it's the earth that moves.
Okay. Anyway, yeah. So if they're going to turn out to be real political questions like that, it's very hard for anyone to predict what happens or what way things go. I would simply say that I would expect statements that are further and further away from the way you think the world works to come out of people, because politicians debating issues tend to take relatively extreme positions publicly to advocate for the whatever direction they want, whether that's in favor or against the thing you believe in. That's the way this stuff works, and having it really firmly in the political arena. I mean, this CFA whatever group is a bunch of people
Campaign
that are
for accountability.
Reasonably well-known group that has been associated with liberal advocacy groups for a while. And the fact that they're liberal doesn't really matter in the sense that these are people who have a credible advocacy background and large donors behind them advocating for the stuff that they believe in, whatever that is, for a long time. Politicians tend to listen to that and you can go to their website and get the listing of the people who finance the groups, behind them. Those are large donors over there, so they will get the answers that they're looking for. In some sense, they routinely sue people politicians for doing stuff wrong, not disclosing stuff, that kind of thing. So whether you agree with their direction or not, they are the type that at least will get results. They're sort of they're not the opposite to the Heritage Foundation, but Judicial Watch, I think they were originally supposed to oppose. Whatever, some other conservative thing that similarly has big donors, and they get answers because
they'll get answers because they have clout. And people know that. So right, we've
doesn't mean they're right.
No, nobody's saying that. Look, we don't express an opinion. There are fine people on both sides. So we've gone a little bit over time this week. We know, but there was a lot to talk about. Lots of stuff going on. I can assure you that John will come out of hiding soon, and for the next episode, we hope to be back in the studio. We'll be back in the studio, hopefully. Fingers crossed. And but otherwise, if there's anything that we covered that you may had some thoughts about, please hit us up in the comment section below. Please smash that like and subscribe button, especially the comments. That really helps us out with the algorithm. Thank you very much for tuning in. We appreciate you taking the time, especially today's episode, which is kind of a blockbuster episode, probably the longest one we've had so far. But again, because there was a lot of ground to cover, and simply because this stupid thing about the number. Look, there is no magic number. Nobody knows. I mean, somebody knows, but it's definitely not us. What the terrorism financing is worth as a proportion of the total crypto flows. It's a difficult number to figure out, and trust us that everybody's trying to work at it. But
there will eventually be an estimate that's signed off by the then U.S. Director of National Intelligence. There will be hearings in which this is resolved.
But to say that, boom, here's your number and go off with it, it's just too early. We don't know. And this is why we had to spend so much time talking about it. But otherwise, have a great weekend ahead. We hope to see you again next week, and thank you for tuning in. Talk to you soon. Bye.